Hi, I'm Terry Cox, Communications Director at the California Statewide Law Enforcement Association. And with me is our Chief Counsel, Kasey Clark. Kasey, welcome. Before we get started on our topic, there are some of our members who have not met you. Tell us a little bit about you and your role here at CSLEA.
Thank you, Terry. I am I serve two roles. I'm both Chief Counsel, which means I am responsible for overseeing the legal division of 6 attorneys. We have 3 up north, including myself, and 3 in our southern office in Westminster. I'm also General Manager for the entire organization, which means I oversee the day-to-day operations of all the functions that CSLEA performs.
You also see the questions that come in from our members, and there are a lot of questions. One of them has to do with conflict of interest. Can you walk us through that? What is conflict of interest?
Yeah, the term is used in a couple of different ways. In the traditional sense, it's kind of a he said, she said. One person is saying that somebody else is responsible for the same event that the other person is saying that the other person's responsible for. So I think in the classic sense, you could have 2 peace officers attempting to take somebody into custody. There's some physical struggle that ensues. A complaint is made by the suspect that they were roughed up in the process, and one of the investigators claims that the other person used improper tactics or force, and vice versa, the other investigator alleges that the other investigator was the one who was actually responsible. So that's kind of a classic case scenario. We actually had one of my attorneys consulted with me this morning on a conflict of interest or a possible conflict where a subject of a contact was accusing 2 investigators who are now going to be the subject of an internal investigation of being rude and discourteous in the course of a contact. One of the investigators denies it. The other one says that the other investigator actually may have been short, curt, maybe discourteous, and so we're trying to reconcile whether an actual legal conflict exists.
Does this arise a lot?
I don't know if I'd say a lot. It's a frequent issue that we have to deal with when we're responsible for representing 7,000 employees throughout the state.
What are the most common circumstances in which conflict of interest arises?
The circumstances where we see it arise most frequently is when a member contacts us to advance a claim against another employee. A member of ours contacts us and says they've been discriminated against, or a manager has been mistreating them. Not necessarily even a manager, an immediate line supervisor. And when we hear those words, our obligation is to first check our database and find out whether the accused individual is a member, because our foremost responsibility from a legal division standpoint is to represent the accused employee. That's one of the single most important reasons why we exist. And so in order to make sure that we don't get ourselves in the middle of a conflict of interest, our first responsibility is check our membership database, find out whether the accused is a member. If they are, then we have to distance ourselves from the accused employee, because if that complaint actually goes forward and there is going to be some either investigation or in the possibility of disciplinary action, we have to be in a position to represent the accused. So those are kind of the classic cases that come up the most frequently. Our obligation is to keep people out of trouble, and it's hard, it's awkward, and you have somebody that feels that the labor organization should be there for everybody for every reason. When somebody calls and complains that they're being mistreated by a supervisor and they expect us to intervene on their behalf, telling them that we really can't get involved and provide formal representation to somebody that is making allegations against another member, it can be a difficult situation for the person who believes they're being mistreated to understand. The way that I try to enlighten them is to turn the tables and try to provide a scenario that if somebody were contacting me about them being the problem and I would be providing the same advice to the person who was calling to complain about them. Would be, I can't facilitate or formally represent somebody that is making allegations against a member because I have to be in a position to defend them.
Now, does having supervisors in the bargaining unit increase the likelihood of conflict?
I would say yes, because oftentimes these conflicts are with supervisors. I mean, we do have some supervisors that are in the bargaining unit. We have special agent supervisors with Department of Justice that are in the actual bargaining unit. We have supervisors with fish and game lieutenant specialists that are in the bargaining unit. Any supervisor or even manager that supervises Unit 7 rank and file members, even if they're not in the bargaining unit, has the option to be a member of CSLEA, and oftentimes they elect to do so in order to maintain benefits like legal defense, insurances, etc. So I guess the short answer is yes. Is it still worth it to have them in the unit? I think definitely, because there is a benefit in numbers. The larger you are, the more persuasive you can be, the more powerful you can be, the more you can influence things. And I also believe if there is an option to have particularly line supervisors, the people that employees are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, if they're on the same team, if they're part of CSLEA, part of the bargaining unit, it's better to make them feel like they're on the same team than playing for management when it comes to supervision, evaluating performance, counseling, discipline, all those sorts of things.
Now, do you get complaints from our members about conflict of interest? Are there some common complaints that come in from our members?
Yeah, I mean, I think the classic complaint is, if I'm paying dues money, why won't you represent me under these circumstances? If we were to do that, it just really, from an ethical standpoint, we have legal obligations as attorneys to the state bar. So we have to avoid conflicts of interest. But if we were to provide representation to employees that wanted to make complaints against other members, whether it be for discrimination, harassment, misconduct, whatever the case may be, if we agreed to assume representation and formally facilitated that complaint process, and then a complaint evolved into an investigation and possible discipline, we would have to appoint a legal conflict attorney, which would mean CSLA would have to pay dues money that members are putting into the organization to hire outside counsel. And the irony would be that the better that we did on behalf of the person who was making the complaint in terms of advancing it, the more money it would cost CSLEA for the work that was being performed by the outside counsel. And these processes could evolve into disciplinary actions, etc. Thousands and thousands of dollars in dues money could be going to outside attorneys for these cases, and if you add those expenses to the bottom line, then we're in a situation where we would have to be raising dues in order to provide that as a benefit. So it's really hard to tell somebody, yes, you are a dues paying member, no, I can't represent you under these circumstances. What I have to do is direct them to the appropriate processes. Many agencies have their own internal investigative units. There's human resources that can provide guidance in terms of EEO complaints. There's Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the federal EEOC, if it's a discrimination complaint, sexual harassment, etc. And trying to point them into the appropriate channel and get so that they have an ability to advance their concerns without establishing an attorney-client relationship, getting into the details of what their complaint is. So it puts us in a position to potentially defend the accused individual is how we have to handle it.
So the door isn't closed. There are avenues for them should you not be able to represent them.
Right. I mean, there are resources out there. It can't be through CSLEA. We can't establish that attorney-client relationship and get into the details of their complaint. We can point them in the right direction, and most of those other entities will help facilitate. They'll instruct them, this is what you need to do in order to pursue a complaint if you have a complaint that falls within our jurisdiction.
And because members have so many questions about conflict of interest, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to bring up about it?
Yeah, I've done my best in this video to help people understand why it is we can't do certain things. I think that people have to appreciate that our first and foremost responsibility is the defense of our membership. And that's why we've got to be in a position to zealously defend our members who may be accused of misconduct, whether it comes from another member or whether it comes from the outside.
All right, certainly a lot of questions. If we haven't cleared this up for you, you have further questions or any ideas or suggestions for us, give us a call or send us an email. The information is here on your screen. Thank you.